Good morning, everyone. There's a story told about this man who goes into a forest and he sees a child doing archery, and he sees that on every single tree the child, this 5-year-old kid, managed to get a bullseye right in the middle. Perfect, every single time. He said to this kid, "How is it that at 5 years old you're such a good archer?" So the kid said, "I'll tell you what I do. First I shoot the arrow, and after it hits the tree, I go and draw circles around the arrow." There's two ways to learn history. The typical way is what historians do. They look at history and they draw circles around history, meaning they learn lessons from history. But this week's parsha does Hashem's form of history, which is Hashem predicts where history is going to go, where the arrow is going to fly. And the Torah in this week's Torah portion, and by the way, the custom is this Shabbat, the Torah reader lowers his voice. He almost whispers the Torah reading, because the reading this week is so harsh as it predicts the tragedies and the misfortune and the calamities and the oppression and the persecution that Jews will go through for thousands of years. And we lower our voice because now we know it as history. In hindsight, it all occurred, especially in the Holocaust. But this is the Torah saying what's going to happen to the Jewish people. But what's the punchline of this week's Torah portion? Hope. God says at the end of all of these tragedies, "V'af gam zos," despite all of this that you'll go through, I will never forsake you. I will never abandon you. I will never sever my relationship with you. I will bring you back to the land of your forefathers. And here's where God predicts not only the bad news, but the good news. That after everything we will go through, when everyone else will think our hope is gone, as the prophet Ezekiel says in the famous prophecy, Ezekiel 36, about the valley of dry bones, where God showed him a valley of dry bones and said, "Will these bones ever live?" And in the prophecy, he hears God saying that the nations say, "Avda tikvateinu," our hope is lost. And he says, "Od lo avda tikvateinu." That's why the national anthem of Israel was born out of those words, our hope was not lost. Meaning, everyone will say our hope is gone. As I once told you that in the 70s, there was a magazine called Look Magazine. They wrote a cover story about the American vanishing Jew. Based on predictions from great sociologists at Harvard University, that by 2000 there'll be no more American Jews. Well, the only thing that vanished was Look magazine. The Jewish people are still going strong. Last night we had a whole series about a film and a discussion about anti-Semitism. Who would think that the Jewish people would still be here despite everything that went around? Well, God knew it, and He said it in this week's parsha. V'av gam zos, despite everything you go through, you'll never be lost. I will always hold you as my nation, and you will come back, as it says in Deuteronomy, to the land of Israel. This is a prophecy and a prediction of unprecedented proportions. But Rabbi Jonathan Sachs says something very beautiful. He says that the Jewish people are the voice of hope in the conversation of mankind. If anyone feels hopeless, if anyone feels despair, all they have to do is look at the story of the Jewish people. Of people who, against all odds, overcame all the challenges and all the adversities. In 1945, the Jewish people came eyeball to eyeball with the angel of death. And in 1948, we came back to Eretz Yisrael. And therefore, this week's Torah portion teaches us to never lose our hope. And it's interesting that in Hebrew, there are certain words that don't exist. One such word is tragedy. When you ask an Israeli, how do you say tragedy in Hebrew? You know what they say? Tragedia. It's basically the English word with an Israeli accent. Why? Because in Judaism, there's no such word tragedy in the vocabulary, in the dictionary. You know why? Because a Jew believes in hope and faith in God. There's no such thing as tragedy. Tragedy means that life's circumstances are random, that your dreams and your hopes will, crash against the rocks and be wrecked against the rocks of reality, and that there's no plan. When you believe in Hashem and you believe in the plan of life, even if you go through hardships, you always have hope. And you're never hopeless, and you never despair. And that's what kept the Jewish people alive. The Jewish people kept hope alive for thousands of years, and hope is what kept the Jewish people alive. And sometimes in our personal lives, I feel that we lose hope. But all we have to do is look back at all the times in our lives we thought the situation was hopeless. And you'll quickly make a list of, in this situation I thought there was no way out. Because rationally, looking at the facts, there was no way out of the situation. It was hopeless. But hope is something transcendent. It comes from a higher place, from God. And therefore, it doesn't have to be rational. And as soon as you make this list of all the circumstances in life that you thought were hopeless, and suddenly hope arose, and the situation changed, it will restore your faith in God and your hope in the future. I tell a story about a man who was in a burning building, and he's screaming, help, help. He was a wealthy man. Somebody runs in, rescues him, pulls him out. And the guy says to him, I'm a wealthy man. Name your price. I want to reward you for saving my life. And the man who saved him says, I'll take half of what you would have given me when you were stuck in the burning building. When we're in a situation that seems hopeless, we think, I'll do anything to get out of the situation. Once we get out of it, we forget how desperate we were and how God saved us. So we have to remember the past, and that's why this week's parasha reminds us that everything we went through was predicted, and yet we saw the miracle of our generation. The words of this week's parasha, despite all of this, God says, I will bring you back to the land of Israel. Despite whatever challenges we may have in our lives, we have to remember that God will redeem us, and therefore the word tragedy does not belong in the Jewish dictionary, only the word faith and the word hope.